All right, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'll get started as people are joining us onto today's webinar. I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Corinne Walda. I'm the Senior Director of Economic Vitality at the Boulder Chamber. As was indicated in the registration for this one, this is a special session. We did do our COVID update last week, and we will do it again next Thursday at 1. But today we're honored to have a guest speaker talk about one of the top issues I've heard from many businesses, as well as other folks in this community I've heard from many businesses, and that is the 2 years of customer collisions and their impacts on staff, talking about masks and vaccinations and all of those items that we know have been stressors, because a lot of times businesses have been that front line. So we do have a special presenter today that will be a majority of the time. He will make it slightly interactive, so please use the chat when he asks you to do so. I'm going to put into the chat the link to last week's recording of the public health update, which did go out in yesterday's email. But if you would like to see, where the trends are, what are the recommendations, some of the hospital statuses, that's still pretty relevant information, and you can check out last week's recording. You please feel free to ask any questions via email. You can put them in Q&A, and I'll try to answer some of those if it's not related to this particular presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker today, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself. But we are honored to have with us today Bill Prasad, who's going to do customer collisions, navigating the impact on staff. Bill, take it away.
Thanks, Corinne. Hi there. My name is Bill Prasad. I'm speaking to you from lovely Houston, Texas, where I've lived here for about 5 years. In getting to know some of the challenges and some of the issues being seen by Boulder County residents, I've threatened Corinne that I'm going to visit her and spend a week, my wife and I, with her. She has said, I'm welcome to visit. So somewhere along the way, I would love to see the community. I work here in Houston, Texas as a licensed professional counselor, which means part of my time I am working in a private practice with other doctors. I am working with individuals who are challenged by anxiety or depression, and I specialize in trauma and then also in drug addiction. I also do critical incident response, which means I am either called to a city or a company, or I intervene virtually where there has been some type of traumatic incident. It may be a situation where a peer has passed away, or it could be a high impact, large mass scale incident, such as a natural disaster or an active shooter. And then I do corporate trainings such as this, and I've had the opportunity to get in front of many of you folks in the past in reference to talking about challenging issues and mental health. And in this particular case, the collisions, and boy, they have been happening for a while, between customers and people who are working service positions. Could be a hair salon, could be a gym, could be at the bank, all of those. And how is that affecting our staff? And how can we help our staff navigate this? And how do we navigate this also as a business owner, maybe as a manager, a supervisor? So let's jump in and take a look at what is going to be on the menu. As we go through this, I'm going to be asking you some questions. I'd like to be able to hear from you. I have the chat box open here on my left. By the way, I have one camera in front of me with a monitor, another monitor here, and another monitor over here. So if my head is on a bit of a swivel, that's why. When I first told my wife I wanted 3 monitors, she looked back at me and thought, Bill, isn't that a little excessive? But it has worked out well. So I have my chat box over here. Let's jump in. What happened to those rules? What happened to rules guiding being polite? Where are those rules? We're going to take a look at what I call expectorating into the wind. Back to the future. How are things the same? How are they different when you compare 2020, 21, 22 to 1918? Did you know that the model city for fighting the pandemic in 1918 was actually in Colorado. What in the world does my birthday have to do with it? I had a birthday earlier this month. How do you handle difficult customers? How do you get your staff ready to have encounters that they have never had before the pandemic? We'll take a look at some case studies because I'll want your input and your thoughts and your ideas in reference to how to handle some situations. And then hopefully you can walk away from this with an action plan. So let me ask you, as either a worker or someone who's running a small business, when it comes to working with customers, what has been the most difficult part? And please feel free to use your chat box to give me an answer. What has been the hardest part? Corinne, while we're waiting for an answer, can you think of some things you've seen or heard in reference to what have been some of the difficulties?
Absolutely. And I was actually going to put them in the chat, but I can talk. I think Jen brings it up great here, keeping up with all the changes to the orders, the signage, being the enforcers of rules that you didn't create, but having to do it yourself. Receiving the pushback that's directed at you, but that, again, that you didn't create these rules, somebody else did, or if you did create them, the pushback that you're getting, and then you're starting to get a bunch more in.
All right, mask wearing, customers refusing to wear a mask or raising their voice or threatening staff. Yeah, all of those have occurred.
And staff talking about, when you require vaccinations, starting to bring in political aspects to the vaccination requirements and those types of things. So you're getting it all right here.
Absolutely. And I see one person has said managing employee burnout. The first training of my day was an hour with a city in California where everyone in the room was a city worker. And we had an hour training on how to manage burnout. So the world we live in might look like this. That in many cases, people are having this visceral response to almost anything. And then maybe if we narrow and drill down to what might be happening in the world of retail or a store, it might look like this. When I go to grocery stores, one of the things that I try to do is, and I know this might make me a candidate for the commercial that says, don't act like your parents. But I will at times say to someone who's working there, thanks for your work. Just a couple of words. So the rules that we've been living under, wearing masks, you should cover your nose and mouth when you're sneezing. Schools have been closed, avoiding large events. But wait a minute, are they the current rules? Or are they rules from 1918? Or is it both? 1918, one of the things that was difficult to enforce was don't spit in public. Up until the pandemic, spitting on the sidewalk in public was not looked down upon. But in this particular case, people were warned not to do that, that spit spreads death. In one particular city in 1918, Philadelphia had a couple of parades, one parade in specifically. In 1918, Philadelphia had the highest death rate of any major American city. But the big difference in reference to getting people to cooperate in 1918 versus 2020 was there was something going on in 1918, 1919 that is not going on now. It was a world event. Can anyone guess as to what was going on in 1918 that is not going on now? That was a world event then. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. World War I. So in many cases, someone could say to someone else, hey, it's patriotic to wear a mask because you're preventing the spread of this flu that is infecting our soldiers. So it was at times patriotic to wear a mask. There were other things going on. So tell me if some of this sounds like 2020. I pulled some headlines from 1918, 1919. Here's what I found. 100 mask slackers. So people who didn't wear masks, there was a name for them. They were called mask slackers. 10 days in jail for not wearing the anti-mask flu in one city. A shooting, 3 shot in a struggle with a mask slacker. Experts doubt the value of a mask. Physicians thought, some of them thought wearing a mask was absurd. And there's an anti-mask meeting. Now, keep in mind that in 1918, 1919, the same physicians who might have thought that wearing a mask was absurd were also treating the flu by doing one of 3 things, either telling the patient to take large amounts of aspirin, which alone might be harmful, or people were being told to inhale secondhand smoke, or they were doing bloodletting. Keep in mind that the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine really didn't come together until the mid-1890s. So here it is, not too long after that, that we are wrestling with a pandemic. Question about the 1918 flu. Did we develop a vaccine for it? Yes or no? Chat box, what do you think? '18 flu. Did we develop a vaccine for it? I have one person who has said no. Any other no's or yeses? The answer is no, we did not. We did not develop a vaccine. But a lot of people, a lot of epidemiologists will say that that particular flu never went away. That the seasonal flu that we have each year is actually had its origin in that 1918 flu epidemic. If you're wondering what Boulder did, there was an all-out quarantine with a lot of things being shut down. Colorado's first flu cases were in Boulder, brought by soldiers coming from Montana to train at the University of Colorado, and that's according to research by a Colorado historian. On September 21st, 1918, 12 soldiers became ill. Within a week, 95 Boulder soldiers, and this was part of the Student Army Training Corps, got sick and were quarantined. So what about quarantining against the world? There was a community in Colorado that quarantined against the world by being really aggressive in its approach. They erected barricades, literally, around their town. You came into the town, you were automatically sequestered. If you violated any of the provisions, you were arrested. They closed schools and churches. They banned parties and street gatherings. This went on for at least 4 months. And nationally, during the waves of infections, about 1 out of every 160 people in the US died due to the Spanish flu. But in this particular Colorado city, during the first 2 waves, the most deadly waves, 0 people died. Does anyone have a guess as to what community, what city I'm talking about in Colorado? Corinne didn't tell you, but if you guess correctly, you'll get a cheese sandwich and a warm-up jacket as a gift. Yes, someone has guessed it. That's great. Corinne, this gentleman gets a cheese sandwich and a warm-up jacket. There
Make
you
sure to
go.
deliver. Thank you.
There you go. That is the community. Has anyone been to, and is the correct pronunciation, Corinne, Gunnison? Has anyone been to Gunnison? So there was a tabletop tabletop exercise done in 2006 at the Pentagon, which looked at infectious diseases. And during that tabletop exercise, they studied what was done in Gunnison. So let's fast forward to now. Customer anger causes emotional injuries to service reps. This is in Psychology Today, an article that was posted in 2013. What is the effect of customer anger on people who work in the service industry? So it isn't something that's recent in reference to knowing the deleterious effects of anger and verbal assault and abuse and raising your voices at people in the service industry. It's not new. Let's talk about trauma here. Let's talk about it in terms of what your customers and also what might your workers be bringing to the table in reference to prior experiences that might make it more difficult for them to navigate either their lives or navigate the jobs they're in because of things happening, collisions that might be triggering them. What might some of those things be? They may have grown up in situations where they were bullied, or in their current situation at work, bullying might be allowed. They might have been the victims of a crime. Now, once again, we're talking about the people who work for you and also some of the customers who are coming in their background. Are they bringing some of these things to the table? Natural disasters. Have they been through natural disasters? A number of people, a large number of people here in Houston moved, they left and moved out of Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina hit. They lost their homes there in Louisiana. Then they moved to Houston, and then they lost their homes again in Hurricane Harvey. And certainly a number of people in your area have lost their homes because of fires, natural disasters. Is someone bringing to the table early childhood trauma? Were they physically abused or neglected as children? Domestic violence, some type of intimate partner violence. Have they gone through medical trauma? Physical abuse. Have they gone to war? Are they veterans of OIF and OEF, as in fighting in Afghanistan or Iraq? Approximately 1 out of every 4 of our people coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq are having pretty serious difficulties. That's a pretty high number. You could also flip it and say, well, 3 out of every 4 are resilient, and people who are in the military generally have high rates of resiliency. But in these particular cases, 1 out of every 4, and I have an intimate glimpse at this because I work for an organization, I do work for them, and they send me specifically active duty or veterans of OIF or OEF. And then sexual assault. So take a look at that list. These are all the experiences that some of your workers may have had before the pandemic, or some of your customers may be carrying this with them when they walk into your hair salon, your nail salon, your grocery store. And then here it comes, the pandemic. And with it, political strife, fractures in our community. Now, I told Corinne in advance that I would make, as far as full disclosure, I would tell everyone what political party, or what party actually, I support. And I'm a fervent supporter of the birthday party, especially since it was my birthday just a couple of weeks ago. So bringing trauma to the table. Certainly the Denver Lakewood shootings a few weeks ago, all the way to the King's Supermarket shooting. Go back to Columbine in 1999. There's a record of active shooter events in Colorado. Add to this the recent fires, and you get a menu of reactions and experiences that might be walking into your business at any time, or some of these people who work for you may have gone through this. So what are some symptoms that you might see either in the workforce or on the part of customers? If a customer goes into a store and maybe they hear a loud noise, maybe me or Lane or Corinne or some other folks might just jump a bit and we'd be fine. But if they've been through a trauma, they might jump and then they'll stay in this state of heightened anxiety. They will at times get angry, or maybe they'll leave the store. And so this at times can lead to a collision in a store. Sometimes there are loud noises in a store, and sometimes people get startled. This might be the reason. There's a difference between most of us who might just get startled, and then you check with us about a minute or two later, and we have really no response. A person will stay in a state of anxiety. Also, when we talk about hypervigilance and arousal, we also have to talk about heightened vigilance in reference to being aware of your surroundings. And what's the difference between the hypervigilance or vigilance that someone might have as a bank teller in a bank versus hypervigilance is that you do have to be vigilant in a bank. You should be vigilant in a retail establishment. But after you've gone through something, at times, every customer coming in looks like a robber. I need to keep an eye on everybody at all times because there might be violence connected to that. With some of my soldiers and my firefighters and my police officers, mostly my police officers and my soldiers and Marines that I work with, when they come back and they are in a hypervigilant state, they will walk into a restaurant and they will want to be seated in a place where they can see the exit. And at times, if it's really crowded, they will not want to be seated. It's too crowded. There's too much going on. I will eat somewhere else. So we talk in terms of hypervigilance, and then arousal is a response to a smell, perhaps, or a sound that triggers us. Smells are really imprinted on our memories. Most of us, the memory that we have is some type of childhood smell that many cases is connected to growing up and smelling food as children. One of mine is that I can still bring to mind the smell of my grandmother making apple pie. That sound has an effect on me, and it's a wonderful effect. But the smells associated with other things that go along with maybe law enforcement or firefighting can be a point of arousal for people. Re-experiencing. Some people will re-experience their trauma through nightmares, or they might re-experience their trauma through flashbacks. Now, how might you see this in a store, or how might you see this with a worker? Well, if you are having nightmares and they're waking you up, you're not getting very much sleep. So you're coming into work, you're sleepy, you're drowsy, you're more irritable, you're having trouble focusing, or a customer is coming in and they can't sleep because of nightmares related to a trauma in their past, and they're more prone to getting angry, getting outraged. And then the last one is another symptom of trauma is negative emotions or numbness. Negative, when we talk about numbness, in many cases, people who've gone through a traumatic event, when they are with others and those others are laughing, their response is, I don't really think that's funny. Or other people are sad or crying and their response is nothing. In other words, it's a flatline response. It's kind of a poker face. It's like, I don't feel anything. Or sometimes the only emotion they feel is anger. So let's take a look at a case study. On November 5th, there was a large concert by a rapper named Travis Scott, outdoor concert in Houston. As a result of a crowd surge, 20 people were hospitalized, 300 people were injured. These were mostly people in their 20s and 30s. As a result, when we take a look at people in their 20s, 3 people who died were in their 20s. 2 people who died were teenagers. There was 1 child, I believe he was 10 or 11, who died. So that's the backdrop. Let's make you a store owner. Let's imagine you are operating a clothing store inside a mall. Corinne, what's a popular mall in the Boulder area?
We have a couple outdoor. 29th Street is located. The downtown is considered sort of like a mall. And then we have indoor, we have Flatirons and a few others in the area.
Okay, so let's imagine one of those indoor malls. You are the store manager. You have teenagers on staff. You have a couple of teenagers who were at that concert. So on November 12th, I was called to a clothing store in a mall. 2 teenagers who were working there that night were at the concert, and the store manager had some concerns. So let's brainstorm this a bit. What symptoms or challenges might the teenagers have been running into, or what might the store manager have seen to prompt the call for me to come in? And once again, I'll look at the chat box. What do you think? One person says his music was playing. And you are correct. The music was playing. Also, these kids were really uncomfortable around customers. So they're uncomfortable around customers. It's the Christmas rush. So crowds, customers, and they're back into a small room in the back of the store. So now they're kind of, the room was about the size of the average person's bathroom, and it's stocked with clothes. And so they were having kind of a claustrophobic reaction, but it was a trauma-related reaction. And what it came down to was, it was my sense that these 2 kids should not be working in a retail environment that night. Now, it's not up to me to tell a store manager, you need to send these people home. That's not my role. But my role is, as a consultant, to say, here are some of the things that are affecting them, and to say they may not really function well in an environment where they're in a small space or lots of crowds and lots of confusion around them. So in the end, the store manager did send them home. And one person said, yes, sir, they may not have been their usual selves. In a retail clothing environment, I used to work in that environment. You really have to be bubbly, outgoing, friendly, smile on your face. This is not what I was seeing. So a nation on hold wants to speak with a manager. November 2020, after the election, more than half of workers said they expected the behavior to improve. 48% of all adults said we expect the behavior to improve. 37% of workers in August of 2021, well, you can see the expectations now are starting to drop. 37% expected workers expected behavior to improve, 39% of all adults. Here's the irony here that's directly related to business. What most business owners want is the frictionless delivery of their services. They want as few impediments as possible to get in the way of the delivery of the service. So according to one individual from a consulting firm, consumers had been seduced into the idea of the frictionless economy, the notion you can get whatever you wanted the moment you wanted. And of course, if we're selling a service or a product, we want it to be as easy for the consumer as possible. I live in a small house, less than 1,600 square feet. All I have to do is walk into my kitchen, maybe 35 or 40 feet away, and say the wake up word for my Alexa device and tell it to order my protein drink, my protein bars, say order it, and I'll have it in the next couple of days. That's frictionless. People are not accustomed to things getting in their way, and they're really pushing back on it, in part because they've been seduced into the idea of a frictionless community. More than half consumers in one piece of research reported at least one negative customer experience in a 1-month period. This comes out to 6 angry customer encounters a year. So customer anger, one of the first things you've got to remember, and you've got to find a way to educate your workers to remain calm. And if they feel like they're going to get angry, they're going to blow a gasket, that there is a plan B, as in find me, drop me a note, say just a moment to the customer, I'm going to get the manager. Shift your mindset, meaning you've got to stay focused on the problem as opposed to the behavior of the customer. Acknowledge their distress, meaning that if I'm a customer and someone who is taking care of me says, wow, this sounds like it's been a problem for you, this has been hard, that lands on me very well. Acknowledge the customer is having distress, or acknowledge that your worker is having a hard time with this. Saying to your worker, I'll bet this has been hard for you, or it sounds like this has been really difficult. Making sure you and your workers introduce yourselves to your customers. Learn about the person you are talking to. Learn about your customers. Learn about your employees. Without crossing any personal lines, what are their lives like? What are their names of their wife? What are the names of their kids? When I teach spin at a country club. The people who are in that classroom are not just students, they are also customers. One of the things I need to do is remember their names, names of their kids, names of their husbands. When they walk in, I need to be able to say, hi there, Mary, or hello, John, how's your daughter? Spend more time listening than speaking. Repeat the concerns back to the customer. It might sound like something like this. So Corinne, if I understand what you're saying, it sounds like the product wasn't delivered on time and that caused a real problem for you. Sympathize, empathize, and at times, when it's effective, apologize. So customer service threats. First of all, when a customer is angry, it's likely that an event or series of events has led to that. It wasn't maybe one thing. It's your job as a customer service representative to sift through the emotion, anger, and maybe threats and determine the cause of the frustration. What's really under this? Making sure that taking it seriously versus taking it personally. Now, does that give customers license to say anything they want to us? No. But can you talk past it and focus on the problem? Some people will throw politics at us. Some people will throw politics and dispersions at us. Can we talk past it and focus on the problem? Here's an example. In a discussion about gun control in a social setting, one person said to the other, well, I've got very strong feelings about gun control, and here are the feelings. The other person who was listening thought the opposite about gun control. They had two different positions, but the person who was listening didn't say, well, let me tell you how I feel. The person looked at them and said, So it sounds like you're really serious about this. Tell me why it's important to you. The other person said, well, this is important to me. And it was about whether or not teachers should have guns in school. The person said, I'm a parent. I want my kids protected. So that's why I think teachers should have guns in school. The other person listened to that and said, you know, I have kids in the public school system too, and I really worry about their safety. So I'm with you on that. We're both parents, we worry. So they found some common ground. It didn't turn into an argument or a debate. And when we go into these conversations, part of it can be about letting the other person know perhaps how you feel, but if your goal is, I'm going to let you know how I feel, and I need you to think exactly like me, and if you don't, there's something wrong with you, or you don't belong in this country. Those things will cause fractures. You don't always have control over what the customer is going to do. In this age of social media, customers have a stronger voice than they previously did. So with very little effort, they can go online on Facebook, they can write a negative review. You don't have control over perhaps what they do once they get home. You do have control over how you respond. Can you head that off? If you see a negative review, can you respond to it in a way that will make this go away and demonstrate that you are customer friendly? Once again, focus on the issue, not the person. Ask yourself, am I becoming part of the problem? From when I last checked, we started with more than 50 people on this call. Statistics would say that some of the people on this call are bringing trauma with them. They've had some traumatic experiences. Do you know what your experiences are and how they affect you? We all know about those dreadful experiences, but have we done the work necessary, whether it's with a psychotherapist or reading or whatever it is, to understand ourselves, to know what our hot buttons are, to know how to identify when you're getting triggered and then what to do? In many cases, we may know this as people in our maybe 20s, 30s, or 40s, but we're employing people who are teenagers, maybe early 20s, and they don't know. So we have to understand that some things may be triggering them and they don't have the maturity to understand what's happening. Find action items for improvement. To chalk up an encounter as just, well, that was just a crazy, irrational customer, well, that's a missed opportunity. In many cases, there's a lesson to be learned that can help your direct reports in the way they serve the customer. Find that nugget of wisdom and look for it as an opportunity to improve. So what happens when somebody threatens you with a lawsuit? Well, first of all, keep in mind that you can threaten a lawsuit if you don't like my black hair or my glasses. You can make a threat like that. People can threaten anything. In the majority of cases, they don't actually file a lawsuit. So don't panic. Keep in mind that most threats don't reach the stage of an actual lawsuit. In reality, most customers are willing to threaten a lawsuit, but they're unwilling to go forward with it. That being said, that doesn't mean you should completely disregard their threat. Acknowledge their dissatisfaction. Follow any case de-escalation procedures, whatever steps you have in place. If you rush to a solution or freeze or panic, that can end up making things worse. Put yourself in the customer's shoes. Ask your direct reports through role playing as part of their training to switch roles. You're the customer now, as opposed to the person who's behind the counter. Sometimes this helps us in fully comprehending the situation. In many situations, we refuse to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and try to understand. Just because you understand how they're feeling, it doesn't mean you are sending the message that you're right But if sometimes all people need is validation that I'm heard, you understand it. Take notes. When a customer gives you feedback, make sure you take a lot of notes. It shows you're listening to what they're saying and you're recording the important details for later use. If I write some things down and someone will ask me, well, why are you writing this down? Sometimes I will say, well, I'm probably not going to remember all of this. So I do want to write it down. If the customer thinks they lost your attention, they're more likely to proceed with their threat. Meaning, when you're writing, stop for a moment and say, I want to make sure I've got this right. So I wrote down this and that. Is that correct? They say yes or no. If they say yes, okay, great. Please continue. You can assure the customer by repeating details back to them, using the same words they used, the same phrases they used when they're speaking to you. Not only does this show you were listening, but it also helps you align yourself with the customer so they feel they're genuinely, you are genuinely trying to help solve their problem. When your company or you or your direct reports make a mistake, I'm sorry can be some of the two most important words in a relationship. At home with a loved one, 3 phrases: I love you, thank you, I'm sorry. 2 of those 3 you can use in business. Very important phrases. Ask questions. Asking the customer questions not only sends a message that you want to better understand their issue, but it shows you're interested in their experience. By getting the information to provide you with more details about their complaint, you may uncover a workaround or a solution that you didn't see at first. If you have HR or a legal team, make sure they're part of all of this. There is something called trauma-informed approach to the workforce. And essentially, this is a situation where trauma-informed customer service supports the development and maintenance of trusting relationships and helps protect staff against burnout. So during these unusual times, trauma-informed customer service may be just what you need for your staff. And coming from a trauma-informed viewpoint, being able to handle your customers better. Here are 10 small ways to build compassionate customer service. This is part of a research out of Wichita State University. Make sure your employees make a good first impression. Make sure their first impression is not designed. They don't think that just because I make the good first impression, the customer is going to smile and say thank you. In many cases, when you say, hi, good morning, or welcome to the store, a customer just might do this and walk by. That's fine. This is not about eliciting a response. This is about sending a message, making a good first impression. If you promise a customer or a patient that you're going to do it, well, you need to do it. It's important that you do it. Show appreciation and gratitude, saying thank you to your customers again and again, and saying thank you to your direct reports. One of my earliest experiences in retail was as a college kid, and I remember working for the Gap as a college kid, and I remember all of the managers, when I did something like vacuumed the rugs, gathered all the hangers, they always said to me, thank you. That stuck with me. That stayed with me into adulthood. Provide solid training. It's extremely important that people know what's coming at them. Trauma-informed customer care. Once again, further tips: listen and act when customers complain. Go above and beyond what your customers expect. Make it easy on your customers. Make the experience of visiting your organization as easy as possible, remembering that there's a flip side to that. You do want to make it easy, but at times they may push back if it isn't easy. Be open to making mistakes. Be open to saying, as a leader, I made an error. I apologize. Saying that to a customer and also to people you manage can be extremely important. Be in a situation where you're showing that you're human with your direct reports by saying, that's on me, I made a mistake. Customer service, it should be an obsession. And at times, treat your employees like customers. You would thank a customer just like you'd thank an employee. Lead by example. If you treat your employees well, more than likely, they will do the same with your customers. One of the places that I frequent a lot, in part because of the great customer service, and I like the food too, is a company called Chick-fil-A. Do they have Chick-fil-A in Boulder? Okay.
On the outskirts.
All right. So every time I go in there, the people there seem like they're happy to see me. Hi, how are you doing today? What can I get for you? If they pushed a customer interaction that has caught on, where people would say, thank you. And the customer rep would say, of course, my pleasure to help you. Potty mouth. So some customers are harder to handle because they're condescending and rude. One study of frontline workers estimated that 19% of customers they deal with were downright rude, impolite, or disrespectful. Some of the customers said to them, why don't you get a real job? You must feel proud to wear that uniform, but my sunglasses probably cost more than you make in a week. Don't talk to me. I don't understand. Insert your own racial minority there. I don't understand blank people and I don't like them. Blank as in B-L-A-N-K. You blankety blank blank, dirty little blankety blank. People getting sworn out, people who are being called names. So entice your employees to call for backup. One person said, sent a note or gave a note to a manager. This woman doesn't like me. I need some help. Be a guru. Avoid getting defensive. Stay graceful, tactful, calm. Demonstrate this in front of your direct reports. Angry customers who are likely to be rude are also likely to lie. That is according to a piece of research. Part of the reason, they're more likely to have extreme reactions, such as lying even though they aren't normally liars when they're upset. And that's according to research. So one person was returning 5 products to a company. The returns were in original packaging and condition, but one had been torn open and placed in another package. So it was obvious they had used it, taken it out. The employee told the customer they'd refund the 4, but they couldn't refund all 5. Customer continued to say all the products were unused and threatened to have her credit card company stop payment, which that's always a big pain in the neck when that occurs. So what happened? Consider the cost of letting the customer lie. In this particular case, it was going to be the loss of about $10. Calling her out on the lie and trying to stop the credit card threat would likely cost the company more money, time, and stress. Not all customer lies will be this inexpensive. So when there's more at stake, the best bet is back up your side with all the documentation you have and weigh whether it's worth the fight. Case 2, expectations. Sometimes I want it all and I want it all now. At a Dunkin' Donuts, a customer arrived one morning demanding their meal be free because the employee the night prior didn't give her a receipt. This is true. You do get a meal free if you don't get a receipt, but it has to be in that encounter. You can't come back the next day. What's more, she showed up with a camera and demand more and more, and then posted her rant on social media. So some customers demand more attention, deals, and perks. Social media has made it even easier for them to broadcast it. So what can you do? Even if you try to align expectations, some customers, like the Dunkin' Donuts person, will demand more. You want to rely steadfastly on the expectations your company sets, such as timeliness, process, quality, relationship standards. You don't have to tell them it's our policy, but you can remind them of your consistent practices and how You use them to treat all customers fairly. And once again, you weigh it against, well, how much money would I actually lose here? Is it worth the fight? So when it comes to improving customer skills, a list of some things that you can work with in reference to training your employees and points that you can make and things that you can demonstrate. Getting back to my party, birthday party at a restaurant last week. My wife and I went out to that restaurant. What I noticed was when we were finished eating, the manager came by and cleared the table. This was stepping out of his traditional roles. At times, rejecting traditional roles, doing some things extra that are non-traditional for a business leader. Take a moment to debrief what has occurred that afternoon. Don't leave the debrief time last on your list as in if I get time, because in many cases that disappears first. Do you have a buddy system when you have new workers? Can they work together? Can they help each other? Can you educate customers as to why things are this way? In a doctor's office, when I work with medical personnel, I suggest they educate customers on why at times it takes longer to respond. Culture of caring, no bullying in your establishment, in your business. Bullying is not tolerated. Core values, punching home your core values again and again, reminding the people that work for you that if you can walk away from that day saying, I did my best, I stayed in my lane, that's a good day, even on a bad day. Do your employees know that at times it's okay not to be okay? If you have an EAP, do they know about the EAP? Do you work side by side with them? Are you on the floor with them at times? Do they have FaceTime with you? All very important. Or are you seen as that man or that woman in the office who just sequesters themselves? Are you adequately redeploying staff? Are you adequately changing things operational? Things that operationally worked 4 or 5 months ago may not work now. The changing face of the pandemic. Do you give feedback and thank your people? And do you take an opportunity also to ring that bell as far as enforcing values? If a value is excellent customer care, do you say, hey, Mary, I saw how you worked with that customer, Corinne, who came in. You did a great job there. And that really reinforces our value of excellent customer care. So thank you. Remembering yourself and telling your direct reports that a pandemic is not a snapshot and it's not perfect. It is a moving target. In many cases, parts of running a business during a pandemic have been like a business startup. If you've been through a business startup, and I've been through a couple of them in startup psychiatric hospitals, you know, you formulate a policy, you vote on the policy, you roll out the policy, you change the policy, you drop the policy, and then you roll out another policy, all in the space of maybe a couple of weeks. At times, that's what a pandemic is at a business. So what did we learn today? So whether it's 1918 or 2022, whether it's President Wilson, Trump, or Biden, there are some things that are consistent with a pandemic. That trauma-informed customer service and worker care can be an imperative. Understanding that some people might bring trauma to the customer counter. Some people might bring trauma to the workplace. And understanding that vulnerabilities exist, meaning that people who are younger in their teens and early 20s can be more vulnerable to trauma as compared to people who are older. And some of the research shows that women at times are more vulnerable to a PTSD diagnosis than men. Understanding current circumstances such as a relationship breakup or caregiver responsibilities, meaning that is one of your direct reports going through a relationship breakup? Are they trying to take care of a senior mom or dad? Is there a sick child at home? All of those can affect how they deal with customers. Teaching customer connection, not customer collisions. Learning and understanding, keeping people focused on the problem, not the person. Education, preparation, role plays, and training, all important. Can you treat your employees at times like they're customers? Can you throw away traditional roles that might be connected to you being a manager or supervisor and jump in and help out? Ring that bell. Gratitude, enforcement of values, all extremely important. So Corinne, do I have a minute or two to see if there are any questions?
Absolutely. And people on the calls are pretty used to submitting questions. You can use the Q&A or the chat if you have any questions for Bill. Please do so.
And also, Corinne, if you think I missed something, please let me know.
Well, I have a question for you. So we're all pretty tired at this point. I mean, I think, the community foundations even said they've set up 4 emergency funds in the last 2 years right here in the Boulder area because we've been through a lot, COVID, fires, shootings, so forth. So we're all a little exhausted. And a lot of what you're talking about with the managers, I think managers have been under a lot, business owners, managers, they've been under a lot of pressure and stress. So this is more for them. What do you suggest for those managers out there and the business owners that they never really, they didn't have a lot of these, they're facing issues they've never faced before, and how do they deal with the stress and pressure on themselves too, not just their employees? Because a lot of the steps were treat your employee like a customer and know about them, but we have a lot of managers that are going through stress too.
Right. So first of all, as a manager, acknowledge what you bring to the table and remember that you have the second hardest job in the world. The first hardest job is parenting. So if you're a manager and a parent, you've got a full load. When I talk about some of these things in the slide presentation or some things that you've heard in the past, sometimes more can be less. And here's what I mean. In reducing employee burnout and increasing employee performance, one of the things I suggest to managers is that they meet with every employee once or twice a month for a minimum of 5 minutes one-on-one, either via Zoom or in person. A manager might say, Bill, I don't have time to do that. Well, here's what has been discovered as a result of that you reduce the number of people who leave, you reduce the number of situations where you're doing additional coaching, you reduce having to do termination, you reduce having to hire, look through resumes. So in the end, you are reducing the amount of time that is unpredictable. You can predict on your calendar that on Tuesday of this month, I'm meeting with Corinne for 15 minutes. And so I suggest that sometimes more is actually less. If you have the ability to do this, 5 to 15 minutes, 2 meetings a month. In one meeting, the direct report owns the agenda. In the other meeting, you own the agenda. And even if Corinne reached out to me and said, well, Bill, I know we're supposed to meet tomorrow, but I don't really have anything to talk about, I still want to see Corinne. If Corinne wants to tell me about her daughter's soccer game or her nephew's baseball game, that's fine. I'm building a bridge to the employee. I'm connecting to them. So try to look at some of these in terms of more could actually end up being less.
Okay, how about this other scenario? I'm kind of going off some questions we've had. We talk a little bit about, what businesses are facing, and they're facing enforcing of rules that they didn't create. So they're, enforcing mask rules, and in some communities, there's vaccine requirements in some businesses. Let's say someone, let's role play here, Bill. Like, let's say someone walks in and says, I don't want to wear a mask. I'm tired of masks. I'm not wearing a mask and I want to come in. What do you do? Like, using some of the stuff that you mentioned, what do you do? Like,
so a bunch of different things that you can do. You might first say, so what's your name? Person says, Corinne. So Corinne, I'm Bill. I'm the manager here. Sounds like you're having a rough time with masks. And then they might vent again. And then you might say, well, we have a policy here, or according to the county or whatever, you have to wear a mask. Well, I think masks are ridiculous. They don't work anyway. I'm going to talk right past that. I'm not going to get sucked in. I might say, I understand what you're saying. I hear you, but you still have to wear a mask. And then try to brainstorm, can we do anything else for you? So in some restaurants, it's ended up being, can we deliver the food to you? Can you order online? Can you go in another direction? What it might come down to in the end is, I'm sorry, you just can't come in. And that's got to be it. And you can never raise your voice. You can't get angry. Inside, you may be annoyed and tired of this. But the interaction, you cannot match their emotion. You cannot match the intensity of their voice.
So focus on the issue, not the person.
Right.
Don't put yourself into the situation.
Right. And this is where role playing comes in with training an employee. It's important that an employee knows what's coming at them. And it's important that after this type of situation, you debrief the employee. You don't say, hey, let's talk about this sometime. You say, hey, at the end of your shift, come in before your shift ends at 10 minutes before the hour. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this.
Great. All right, we're 2 minutes past. Do you have any last thing you'd like to say, or does anybody else have any last minute comments on chat or Q&A? I do a last call. It's kind of become my thing over 2 years.
Last call from Corinne. So to sum up, and you're welcome. Some folks are saying thank you. To sum up, you've had and you will have difficult days. At times, you're going to walk away thinking that was a terrible day. That was awful. Can you say to yourself, I did my best. I stayed in my lane. Sometimes that is the most we can get from a particular day. And we've got to be able to navigate that, because we can't rely on a string of perfect days. I did my best. I stayed in my lane. So thank you for your time. I know your time is extremely important. I love getting in front of the people of Boulder, and I appreciate it. And be well, take care of you, take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you everybody for joining us. Again, I recorded it for you. If you're massively taking notes, I'll be able to get you that. But also, reminder that next week at 1 o'clock on Thursday, we're back to the Corinne and Tessa show, talking about public health numbers and answering your questions. In the meantime, you know where to find me. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Lane. You guys didn't see him, but Lane's here too. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.